back to A Case of the Jills. Thanks for tuning in today. Today I want to share a story with you about my experience of amenorrhea. I want to just make sure that I explain that this is my personal experience. Your experience of this may be completely different. I'm going to talk about things like how many miles I was running. I might talk about weight or other numbers. If those things are triggering to you, probably don't watch this. If you're okay with me mentioning a few numbers here and there, then we're good. Onward. I actually have returned to getting a normal menstrual cycle. I am on my about to be 5th month back in a normal menstrual cycle after taking the steps that I felt were necessary to get my hormones and my menstrual cycle back on track. So I'm telling you this story as a person who was able to come back from it, and I'm just sharing my story so that maybe it can help you too. Okay, so let's go back almost 5 years ago, because I remember that the last period I had before just starting up again recently was actually on New Year's Eve. My boyfriend and I had gone to New York City for New Year's Eve, and we were meeting friends who were in town. We rented a hotel room and we had a wonderful time. And on New Year's Day, I woke up and, whoa, it was a dire situation. By the way, did you know that there's almost no convenience stores or places for coffee open on the Lower East Side in New York City on New Year's Day? The city that never sleeps was definitely sleeping that morning. It was terrible. I don't know what was worse, my lack of ability to find a pharmacy or the desperate need I had for caffeine on New Year's Day, and everything was closed. What's wrong with you, New York? So around that time, I was running between 30 and 40 miles a week. I was running marathons fairly regularly, but I hadn't fully transitioned into training for ultra marathons at that time. So let me tell you a little bit about my dietary situation at the time. This is really important because this is sort of what set up the cascade of events, and also with a little bit of hindsight bias at this point. I have celiac disease. You can't eat any wheat because your body sees it as a toxin. It's an autoimmune disease. It kind of sucks. Because of that, I was having some trouble digesting even the food that was gluten-free. It's probably due to the damage that I had accrued over the years of being celiac but not knowing about it. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 25 years old. Once I even did get diagnosed, I still had many years of pain and discomfort and difficulty digesting different foods. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll notice that I typically hashtag my posts with hashtag fear-striction. Fear-striction is this term that I came up with to describe when you are afraid of eating certain foods, typically due to an allergy or some other type of dietary consideration, which is legitimate, which in my case is celiac disease, but then you fear so much the symptoms that you get from eating that food that you not only cut that food out, but other foods that sort of seem like it in your mind. This is not really a good idea. This is what I did to cope with my physical symptoms, also just my mental symptoms too. I was afraid of eating things. I would get really bad stomach aches. I would be running to the bathroom. I would get headaches. My body would swell. And I hated it so much. I hated how it made me feel, and I hated how it made me fear eating. I stopped eating a ton of different foods thinking that that was going to help me eliminate the possibility of getting these symptoms. Little did I know that I was setting myself up for worse problems down the road. And after that New Year's Eve, I just never got a period again. It went on for a few months and I didn't really think too much of it. I just thought maybe things were just a little bit irregular, or maybe I was kind of stressed out, or maybe I had been running a little bit more. It just went on and on and on and on. I have no good excuse for why I didn't care more, but I didn't. I have no excuse for this. This is, again, me being real. I really have no excuse for this at all. So of course I decided that this was also a great time for me to increase my mileage so that I could train for my first 50K. It was going to be the Pineland Farms 50K, a beautiful race, by the way, if you get the chance to do it. It was so much fun. I'm increasing my mileage all this time. Period. It's definitely not coming back. I'm supporting myself with eating what I think is a healthy diet, and of course no starchy carbohydrates. So really what I'm eating is a lot of fish, a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables, nuts and seeds of course, and I'm supplementing with protein powder. But I would go for these long runs, 15, 20 miles, sometimes do a marathon, and I would come home and I would refuel. Yes, definitely. There was never a time where I was not refueling, but I just was not refueling with any starchy carbohydrates. At one point in my training early on, I was taking Hammer Recovery, which has whey protein and a whole bunch of carbohydrate in it, and I was diligent about always taking that after a run. But then at some point I just stopped. I think I had a concept of what the right thing to do was, but I didn't do it. So now I have increased mileage happening leading up to this 50K. I'm refueling with what I think is healthy but really is not giving me enough nutrition, and time's just rolling on. Then it's a 50K, and then I'm training for a 50 miler, and then the mileage is just increasing. I'm kind of just going down this road literally and figuratively, and nothing's making me stop. At this point, I admit I did start getting thinner, and I just again thought that, well, this is what happens. I'm an athlete. I'm getting thinner because athletes get thinner. I will say that because I'm kind of a jerk, the only thing that did concern me was the fact that I knew that there was a possibility of bone density issues with not getting a period, and I kind of figured that my biggest problem was to get a stress fracture. I would hear stories of other ultra runners and see how every once in a while, either male or female, someone would end up with a stress fracture. I have to admit, that was my worst nightmare. That was the only thing that I thought was going to be terrible. I did not even consider all the rest. So the other weird thing about this is, again, this is me just telling you my life. I don't have children, and I am not going to have children. I wasn't really concerned about my fertility in the way that many women are, that, by the way, every woman should be, because whether or not you choose to have children, it should not change the fact that you should be diligent and careful of your fertility. I did not know that at the time, or I just didn't think of it. I'm not even going to say that I didn't know it. I just didn't think of it. I just figured, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm not in that world anyway, so let me just, it's ridiculous. It's silly for me to even try to explain what I was thinking at the time, because I'm not sure that I was thinking about anything but training and racing and kind of just like achieving more and more mileage. So of course, somewhere along the way, I decided I would go see a doctor and see if they could tell me why I wasn't getting a period. In my defense, okay, I had my body fat tested, I was at 18%, and I ate a lot. I was eating a lot of food. It's not that I was starving myself or restricting calories. I was eating a ton of calories. This is why it's so strange, and it was very confusing to me. At the time, I thought I was eating enough food, and I was eating a lot. I mean, anyone who saw me eat after a race or a long run, I mean, like, I could eat the house. I out-ate my boyfriend, like, on a regular basis. I decided to go see a gynecologist and get a, checkup, and also ask the question of why I wasn't getting my period. I went to see this woman who supposedly specialized in infertility and hormone issues. I said, I really want to know why I don't get a period. And she took one look at me and said, "You're a skinny runner. What do you expect?" This totally hurt. Even though I probably shouldn't have been hurt, I was really hurt. I was so down after that experience. I just felt like I didn't matter. This woman did tell me, though, that, if I wasn't making any estrogen, if the lining of the uterus was super thin, that I was not only setting myself up for problems with bone density, but also cardiovascular issues. She told me I should probably have an ultrasound to check the lining of my uterus and to see if it was super thin, and that would mean I'm not making any estrogen, and so that was something to consider. So I went and had the ultrasound, and guess what? Paper thin. That uterus was paper thin. She said, "You are just not making any estrogen." Some of the options would have been to take artificial supplementation of hormones. I just, I couldn't even deal with that. I, at one point, was also concerned that I was perimenopausal. She said, "No, you're not perimenopausal." That was good to hear. The other thing she said is, and I have to quote this one, she said, "If you want to bleed, I can put you on the pill." Okay, but we should know that if you get put on the birth control pill and you have amenorrhea and you get a period, it doesn't mean that everything is functioning properly inside. It just means that someone is pacifying you with a pill that is just going to artificially make you feel like everything is normal. But it's not. It's basically a Band-Aid for the situation. But things had started to break down for me. And you're going to hear me talk about overtraining, and you're going to hear me talk about the nutritional choices I was making during this time as the years were going on. But suffice it to say for now, just for the purposes of this video, is that my nutrition really didn't change. I wasn't adding in the proper stuff to support the amount of miles I was doing, and I was increasing my mileage. So now I'm starting to get all these other symptoms associated with overtraining. My body is swelling up when I'm eating certain foods or after exceptionally long runs, like anything over 50K, I started to really start to swell. I was running at this time between 70 and 80 miles a week, and I was having a real hard time with recovery. I had noticed, wow, shocking, I had noticed that my clothes were fitting a little bit differently. I had put on a little bit of weight. It wasn't good weight either. It was kind of like fatty weight. It was kind of around my midsection, also my hips. I just did not feel as lean as I had been before. My clothes were definitely off. I was definitely feeling off physically. So now I'm getting to this kind of like panic situation. Here comes that body image stuff is kicking in. I'm like, gosh, I'm kind of putting on some body fat. Maybe I need to clean up my diet. Maybe I need to run a little harder or a little more or a little extra, or maybe I need to add some hill work in. I think that this mindset is typical. I thought that if I just ran a little more and tightened up my diet, that I would lose those extra pounds that I had gained. Let me just mention that I was feeling like crap at this time. I was exhausted all the time. I could not sleep at night. I had massive insomnia, so many other things associated with overtraining, which, as I said, I will go into in another video. And now I was getting to the point where every time I would go on a long run, I would be swollen. My legs would be swollen, my abdomen would be swollen, and I mean my legs from my thighs all the way down to my ankles, my feet. And I'm not gonna lie, this was kind of a vanity issue. Having these swollen legs, not fitting into my clothes, not having my jeans feel good when I wore them. I just couldn't take it anymore. And then I was lucky enough to plan a really special trip for my very special birthday this year. I was going to run the Rome Marathon on April 10th, which, yes, is my birthday. So my boyfriend and I were training for this race, and I'll never forget, I woke up the morning of our 18-mile run, and I just looked down at my legs, and they were swollen to hell. I couldn't take it anymore, and I broke down. And I said to him, I just don't want to do this anymore. That was kind of it. Okay, now in hindsight, I think that the swelling was related to surges in cortisol, obviously, again, from those nutritional deficiencies, running too much, and a million other things. And I'm not saying that this is related to the amenorrhea, but this was actually the catalyst to make me think I can't take this anymore. I decided right then and there that I would run the marathon in Rome on my birthday, and then that was it. I was going to try to get myself back on track. By coincidence, on the plane ride home, I had downloaded a podcast, and I think it was the Paleo Women podcast, where there was a woman talking about hormonal issues with female athletes. Her name is Christine Hronik, and she has a website and a business called Gauge Girl Training. So I listened to her for 2 hours talk about women and their hormones, and I thought to myself, oh my God, this is me. So with the help of that podcast and also some other resources that I had researched, I kind of made myself a plan to decrease the amount of running I was doing. I was going to try to run between 20 and 30 miles per week and increase the amount of carbohydrate I was taking in. I had read about the fact that low carbohydrate diets, which in effect, due to the kind of fear restriction thing I had mentioned, I had entered into the low or lower carbohydrate zone. I admit that at the beginning I liked being lean, and that was a reason for me to keep it going. But also the initial reason for that was this whole concept of fear restriction, as I explained to you before, which is that I just didn't want to feel sick. In the end, this lower carbohydrate diet, as I understood, had set me up for hormonal disruption, which ended up leading to amenorrhea. So I started doing more research, and this is when I discovered about the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary axis. And this is this whole thing where a lower carbohydrate diet can lead to hormonal disruption, which can lead to irregular periods because your body essentially perceives itself to be in a famine. This is when your cortisol starts zooming up, you start storing extra fat. And this can happen when you're too low in carbohydrates or you're fasting. I did start this for the right reason, but in the end, I ended up with lots of things that I didn't want to happen, which again, amenorrhea for 4.5 years is pretty bad. I really want to talk more about this concept of the lower carbohydrate diets and how it's really affecting female athletes more and more. I want to talk about how you might lose your period even though your body fat is not that low. I want to talk about the fact that this is actually increasing among different types of athletes. So not just runners, but it can be CrossFitters, triathletes, it can be women who just follow lower carbohydrate diets and do moderate exercise, and they're completely befuddled as to why they have lost their period or they have irregular periods. This is so important, and I feel like the information out there just doesn't explain enough. Lots of people are confused. I just don't think we're getting the right information. I also want to point out that this is extremely personal. I don't necessarily think that this stuff is applicable to every single female athlete, but I do think it's applicable to a lot of us. So I'm going to touch on all those topics in different videos. This is going to get too long for me to get into all that right here. But I hope that in my sharing this story with you that you, again, as I've said before, I don't want anyone to feel that they're alone. You're not alone. There's so many people that have similar experiences. And the more we talk about it and the more we get the right information out there and the more we can help each other, we are going to be stronger, fitter, better athletes with more longevity, and that is the key right there. We can probably be at this forever. I know I want to be at this forever, but I want to do it healthfully. And I don't think it's fair for me to cut my career short as an ultra runner because I didn't have the right information. And also blaming myself, I didn't seek it out. That's definitely true, and there's a lot of issues associated with that, but if I'm looking for the right information, I want to have access to it, and I want you to have access to it. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about all of it. Thanks for watching.